We've got lots of folks joining us today. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're very happy that you could be with us for this hour together. We first want to acknowledge with respect that we are presenting today to you on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen people and ancestors, and the work of the Office of the Ombudsperson extends across the traditional territories of many First Nations peoples within what we now call British Columbia. And we honor the many territorial keepers of the lands and waters where we work. My name is Lindsay Hunt. I'm so pleased to be here with you this morning. I am the Learning Specialist with the Public Authority Consultation and Training Team at the Office of the Ombudsperson. And I'll be presenting today along with a few co-presenters. We have Sandy Hermiston, BC's Ombudsperson, who you will meet soon in a few slides, and Jennifer Jones, Manager of the Public Authority Consultation and Training Team. And you'll also meet Jennifer soon. I just want to give thanks to the Island Deaf and Hard of Hearing Center for coordinating sign language interpreting services for us today, so that our session is inclusive to those that communicate using ASL. We also have automated closed captioning available through the Zoom program, and you can find that at the top or bottom of your screen where your Zoom toolbar is. So you can turn that on and off as needed for yourself. So why are we here together for this hour? Well, we really hope that this webinar can provide folks working in public authorities, such as yourself, with a greater understanding of the role of the Ombudsperson, and also gives folks like you, again, a chance to meet BC's Ombudsperson, Sandy Hermiston. So we'll be providing content on our office's role, the legislation that guides our work, how we help, our process, and we'll also be offering a few short case summaries. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We will not be providing the PowerPoint slides to attendees afterwards, but a recording of this webinar will be posted on our website. So let's just talk about how you can participate in today's session. You can pose questions at any time through the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. So you'll find that at the bottom of your screen on that toolbar. You can click on that and type in a question about the webinar's content, and our team will respond by typing an answer back to you. Some questions may be saved until the end of the webinar, when we will have an on-camera Q&A portion with our presenters. So you might not get that typed response immediately. Rather, we're saving those to possibly pose on camera during that Q&A portion. Now we have many people here today, upwards of 400 folks here today, maybe even more. So we might not get to everyone's questions. And if we are unable to get to your question during the webinar, you can email us anytime afterwards and we'll respond. So we will be sharing our email at the very end. And also just a note that we're not taking questions about individual files today. So we will be posting some links and reminders in the chat box. So you should keep an eye on that for resources that we're sharing. And the chat box is only open for us to share links with you. And this is just due to the size of the group today. But we are going to be using a participant engagement tool called Mentimeter. And so I'm just going to provide some instructions on that right now. So here we go. We'll be using Menti today a few times over the course of the hour. We think it's a great program that allows for some engagement, especially with larger groups. So in order to use Menti, we're going to ask that you use your phone, a personal device of some kind that has either a camera or a web browser. So you can use your phone, or you can open up a new browser window on your computer. And you can either go to menti.com and then enter the code on the screen, which is 638208874. Or you can simply take a picture of the QR code up on the screen. So we'll just give you a few moments to get that on your device. But I will let you know that Menti is completely anonymous. So while we're doing these polls, don't worry, your name isn't attached to them. So we'll give folks a few minutes to connect. Hopefully that's connecting for you. If you haven't yet, don't worry, each Menti slide, there will be the code offered at the top of each slide. So let's go to our first one. Hopefully that's coming up for folks. It's just loading right now, it looks like. Great. So this question is, what is your understanding of the role of the ombudsperson? So you've got three options. The first is, I have little or no understanding. The second is, I have some understanding. And then the third is, I understand the role and can explain it. So we've got a few hundred folks we see down at the bottom who are using the Menti, which is great. And we can see those answers coming in live. So the majority, you have some understanding. That's great. A handful have little or no understanding. Well, we're so happy you're here. And then also another handful, you understand the role and you can explain it. So it's great that we're all here. It's a good refresher as well. Okay, I think we'll move on. Let's actually talk about the role of the ombudsperson here. So the term ombudsperson, it might be a bit confusing. And while there are different types of ombuds out there, the role of an ombudsperson is generally to protect people against unfair government decisions and administration. And so our office's vision statement is fairness and accountability in British Columbia's public services. And we're an independent office of the provincial legislature. And this office was established in 1979. So we fulfill our vision by focusing on fairness in all aspects of the work that we do. And just recently, in February of this year, we welcomed British Columbia's 9th independent ombudsperson, Sandy Hermiston. So I'm really excited to be introducing Sandy here. Sandy brings experience from other Canadian and international jurisdictions, including having served as the first ombudsperson for both the Cayman Islands and Prince Edward Island. And throughout her 35-year career in public service, she's focused on promoting fairness in public administration by building trusting relationships with public bodies and communities. So it was just in November of 2025 when BC's Legislative Assembly unanimously recommended Sandy for the role. Sandy intends to focus her tenure here as the BC Ombudsperson on working collaboratively with public bodies to support fair practices and a culture of integrity, focusing on informal resolutions and continuous improvements. And we know that Sandy really does look forward to working with those in the public service to navigate those emerging issues together. So I'm really happy that Sandy could be here with us today and participate in our webinar. So I'm going to hand it over now to Sandy to take us through the next few slides. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sandy Hermiston. As you've already heard, I'm the new ombudsperson for the province of British Columbia. And I'm going to talk about our role of this office and what our mandate looks like. One of the things that's really important for all parties to understand is that we are independent of government. And that independence is created in our statute and is lived in the experience of us reporting directly to the Legislative Assembly through the Office of the Speaker. We don't advocate for political parties. We don't advocate for complainants. We remain impartial, and what we're looking for is fairness in terms of our focus on our investigations. We hear complaints from the public about their treatment by government. Maybe it's how they were treated. Maybe it's a decision that they don't like. They come to our office and complain. And we also have the ability to look into issues by way of, excuse me, by way of what's called a systemic investigation, which is on our own motion. But mainly what we do is we hear complaints from people about some decision that was made by the government. When we're looking at the complaints, we're trying to find resolutions to their concerns and identify any improvements that can be made. We also have the PAC team, which you've already heard from, and they reach out and support public authorities in building fairness into their programs. We have two pieces of legislation that we deal with, both the Ombudsperson Act and the Public Interest Disclosure Act. We're going to start with the Ombudsperson Act, and then later in the presentation, you'll hear about the Public Interest Disclosure Act. The Ombudsperson Act empowers us to investigate complaints from public about unfair treatment, and as I've already said, that's by provincial bodies and also by local governments like municipalities. We also deal with public interest disclosure, and that's for public servants to make disclosures about wrongdoing in the workplace. Together, these mandates really do ensure that we have oversight over the government in terms of how they treat employees and also how they make decisions. I want to talk about our main focus when we're talking about the Ombudsperson Act, and that's whether people are being treated fairly. You'll see the fairness triangle on the slide, and that's a triangle that was developed originally in Saskatchewan. It really tried to encapsulate the work that we do because there is no definition of what administrative fairness is in the legislation. So we have tried to make a clear expression of what we're looking for when we're looking into complaints by the public. And there are really three aspects to that. There is fair service. And when we're looking about whether fair service is an issue or not, we're looking about whether the staff was approachable and whether people were treated with dignity and respect, was confidentiality respected, and maybe if there's a mistake made, was an apology offered. When we look at whether a process is fair, we're really trying to make sure that people had enough information to understand what it was they needed to do in order to get the thing that they're looking for. Did they have enough time to present the information so that they could make a proper application? Was the decision made free from bias or conflict of interest? Those types of things. And then the final aspect of fairness is fair decision making. And in terms of that, we're looking at whether the government had the legal authority to make a decision. Was the decision based on relevant information? Was it made in good faith with proper purpose and based on relevant considerations? Those types of things are the types of factors that we look at. There are more than those, but I just want to give you an overview of what those are. And then in terms of why fairness is important, as public servants, one of your obligations is to be fair to the people who are coming to you. And so when you're fair, you're creating public confidence in your program. And people, when they feel heard and justly treated, accept those decisions, even if they're not in their favor. These principles also will support you in terms of making good decisions and make sure that your operation is effective. The other thing that we do, and it's really important, is we help make sure that you're meeting the legal requirements. And that is an obligation that you have. And I'm sure that you are trying to make sure that you meet those requirements even without our assistance. And finally, it is really just the right thing to do to be fair in terms of the work that you do. I'm going to send it over to Jennifer now.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here today. So for over 45 years, the Ombudsperson has been receiving, referring, and investigating complaints from the public. And every year, thousands of people contact our office for help. They're seeking answers, they're looking for solutions and accountability from provincial and local public bodies. So here's a really broad overview of how we help to ensure fairness in public services here in BC. We listen and assess each question and complaint that's brought to our office from a member of the public. So it's our job to listen with patience, respect, and without taking sides. We will ask questions to understand the complaint and determine how best to help. To give you an idea of the volume of complaints that we receive, each year our office receives between 7,000 and 8,000 complaints and inquiries. And this includes complaints that are within our office's jurisdiction to investigate, about 5,000 to 6,000 every year, and also questions from members of the public about where they might take their complaints, and we call those the inquiries. So after listening to the complaint, sometimes we refer an individual to another organization that's better able to help. In addition, our intake and early resolution team can quickly resolve a complaint by doing an expedited investigation of the public body the complaint's about. So thinking about numbers again, for the last fiscal that we reported out on, our early resolution team resolved about 14% of the jurisdictional complaints that came to us. And I'll talk more about the early resolution process in a moment. But back to the list on the screen, we of course investigate. So for complex or systemic concerns, we conduct those impartial and in-depth investigations. We gather evidence, hear from everyone involved, and we identify unfair practices. We also watch out for complaint trends and systemic issues, or for complaints that impact many people. And out of all of the complaints that we receive at our office, roughly 20 to 40% are assigned to investigators for further assessment, and not all of those are investigated. We can also recommend change. So after we finish investigating a complaint, if we identify an unfairness, we suggest ways to resolve the issue, both for the individual who brought the complaint to our office and for going forward for the benefit of all. And lastly, we educate and consult with public bodies on how to be fair and how to avoid issues and complaints from happening in the first place. So here on the screen are all the public bodies that we have the jurisdiction to investigate as per the Ombudsperson Act. So our jurisdiction includes all BC government ministries, all the provincial boards and commissions, things like Workers' Compensation Board and the BC Human Rights Tribunal, Crown corporations such as ICBC and BC Hydro, local governments, and there's actually over 400 local governments in the province that we have jurisdiction, all schools and school boards in British Columbia, as well as all colleges and universities. We also have the jurisdiction to investigate professional regulatory bodies like the Law Society and the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And we have the jurisdiction to investigate hospitals, health authorities, and health-related agencies in the province, such as pharmacare. Despite this really large number of authorities that we do have jurisdiction over, every year our office receives a high volume of complaints that we refer back to other organizations because we don't have jurisdiction to investigate. So for instance, we don't have jurisdiction to investigate the federal government. Anything federal is outside of our jurisdiction. We also don't have jurisdiction to investigate the police or courts, and we wouldn't investigate individual doctors, lawyers, or other professionals. We don't have jurisdiction over that. We do have jurisdiction over the professional regulatory bodies. Okay, so what do we investigate? And Sandy's already spoken to this briefly, but I'll go into a little bit more depth. We investigate complaints where they raise questions about whether the person was dealt with in an administratively fair manner. And so this often includes investigating things like whether the program or the public service is accessible to service users. We look at whether the decision maker used the correct rules and followed them when making their decision. We look at whether the person who was impacted by a decision was listened to when they raised a question, when they made a request, or when they submitted a complaint. And we also look at whether the person was offered an opportunity to be heard when a decision was made that impacted them, and whether they received an adequate response from the public body. Also, we broadly look at whether the decision was reasonable. So this means taking into consideration the unique circumstances of the person who's involved and whether the relevant rules and information that's available to the decision maker led them to make a fair and equitable decision. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, our intake team does a fabulous job receiving all the inquiries and complaints to our office. They are the first point of contact. So if it's an inquiry, intake does their best to point the person in the right direction and to provide them with information on where they might go to resolve their complaint. If it's a complaint, one of the first things intake does is to look at whether the complaint falls within our office's jurisdiction to investigate. And if it doesn't fall within our jurisdiction, intake will actually refer people where they might go to address it otherwise. If intake determines that the complaint is within our office's jurisdiction, the intake team will sometimes refer people back to the authority that they're complaining about to try to resolve their complaint there first, before our office gets involved. This is more fair to the public authority for them to get a chance to address the concern or at least to be aware of it. And if individuals remain unhappy, of course, they can certainly return to our office with their complaint. In certain situations, the intake team will assess the complaint to see if it might be addressed through the early resolution process. And so these complaints may be time sensitive and they could be about really basic, quick needs. So our intake team can work to resolve complaints that are relatively straightforward. They can help with things like connecting individuals with the public authority staff member who they need to speak with, or they might get individuals quick answers to their concerns. Something like if a phone call needs to happen or a letter hasn't arrived, our early resolution process can help to get that. If a complaint is assessed as a potential issue that could have a quick resolution, the individual will begin to work with an early resolution officer who will work with the public body to resolve those straightforward issues without a full investigation. And we aim to resolve early resolution complaints within 10 business days. So I'm going to give you an example now of an early resolution file. This case summary comes to us from our latest annual report, and all of our annual reports are available on our website. But this in particular is a good example of a complaint that was dealt with as part of our office's early resolution process. So what happened in this case is that Leon applied for a birth certificate through the BC Vital Statistics Agency after his daughter was born. Because of technical difficulties with the online system, Leon had to submit a manual application in person. And several weeks later, there was a medical emergency in Leon's family. He needed to travel internationally, but without his daughter's birth certificate, he couldn't apply for her passport. Leon contacted Vital Statistics and discovered his application had been misplaced. Although it was eventually found, he was told it would still take weeks before the birth certificate could be issued. And so frustrated, Leon asked us for help. One of our early resolution officers contacted the Vital Statistics Agency and explained the urgency of Leon's situation. And the outcome was that Vital Statistics called Leon the next day to let him know that his daughter's birth certificate had been expedited and was ready for pickup. So why does a case like this matter? Well, for urgent, time-sensitive matters like travel for a family emergency, delays in vital records can have really serious impacts. And so ensuring applications are processed quickly and accurately gives families confidence that they can rely on these services when it matters most. Just one example. Okay, so in the case that a complaint does raise a question about fairness and isn't appropriate for the early resolution process, that complaint might move on to investigation. And here I'm going to provide a brief overview of our investigative process. So the first step is notice of investigation, and this is where we notify the public body of the investigation and we provide them with the details of the complaint. We also provide the public body with an opportunity to be heard and share their information and evidence that's relevant to the complaint. This helps us understand the complaint and also any actions that were taken by the public body to respond to it. Section 15 of the Ombudsperson Act empowers staff at our office with the authority to receive information and records that are required as part of the investigation. We then impartially review all the information gathered during the investigation to determine if it is an administrative fairness concern that needs to be addressed. And if we do identify a fairness concern, we'll aim to resolve it with the public organization. So this is about working together to ensure there's fairness moving forward. Once the issue is being resolved, we'll close the file and let both the individual who brought the complaint forward and the public body know. Also, if we find that the public body did not act unfairly, we will explain to the individual who brought forward the complaint the reasons why, and we'll close the file. I do want to mention a few key principles of our office's investigations under the Ombudsperson Act. So as mentioned earlier, our investigations are independent and we conduct them impartially. So we're advocates for fairness, and that means that we're not on the side of the complainant and nor are we on the side of the public authority. We don't prejudge complaints and really our investigations are an opportunity for us to hear both sides. Also, our investigations are intended to be consultative. So we value your input and recognize that you have expertise in your work. We want to hear what you have to say about the issues raised and also how you think they might be resolved. We're resolutions focused, which means that our goal is to work it out if we can. And it really helps if organizations view an investigation as an opportunity for continuous service improvement. In most instances, public bodies are willing to resolve complaints and adopt any suggestions we make for improvements moving forward. Looking at the possible outcomes that can take place because of an investigation by our office, there's a wide variety of things that can happen. As you can see on the screen, individuals might receive an apology from a public authority. They may also receive a better explanation of a decision that was made. In some cases, there may be a new hearing or a reassessment done by the organization, or we might recommend some revisions or additions to policies or procedures in order to ensure that fairness going forward. And in some cases, there might be reimbursement of expenses, but really every complaint and investigation is unique. And so the outcome of an investigation by our office will always be context dependent. So another case summary for you, this time to put into context what an investigated complaint can look like. This case summary also comes from our latest annual report, and again, they're all available on our website. So what happened in this case is Jackson complained to our office about a decision made by WorkSafe BC, which canceled some of his benefits that he was receiving. He felt that this decision was unfair and retaliatory, and that his personal circumstances had been ignored. We investigated this complaint, and while we were reviewing WorkSafe BC's decision, as well as the Workers' Compensation Act, we became concerned that it did not have the legal authority to cancel Jackson's benefits. So essentially, the law didn't say that WorkSafe could do the thing it did. And after discussing our concerns with WorkSafe BC, it agreed that its decision lacked legislative authority, was made in error, and they agreed to reinstate Jackson's benefits. The outcome in this case was that WorkSafe BC rescinded its original decision. They retroactively reinstated Jackson's benefits, and they wrote to him with an explanation and apology. And this case summary really demonstrates that public bodies must act within the legal authority given to them by law. When public bodies act outside of those boundaries, decisions risk being arbitrary and unfair. Okay, so primarily our investigations originate from individuals bringing their individual complaints to our office. However, we also conduct those broader systemic investigations across the province. And these investigations, they generally affect a large number of people. They're related to the underlying structure of a public organization or their service delivery, and they're generally more complex investigations. They also result in a public report with findings and recommendations for that structural and long-lasting change. If you look on the screen, a few of our systemic investigations and public reports, the images of them are up there on the slide. Again, all are available on our website. And just one quick example of a systemic investigation and report is the Alone report. So this systemic investigation found that youth in custody in BC were subjected to prolonged and repeated separate confinement, often with inadequate oversight and supports, and it had a disproportionate impact on Indigenous youth. So as an outcome, the Ministry of Children and Family Development committed to implementing our office's recommendations, including strengthened oversight, trauma-informed policy, safe spaces, and published data. So we're often asked how we can make changes when we find instances of unfairness. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out a quote from former BC Ombudsman when the role was previously called Ombudsman. And part of the quote is here on the slide, but I'm going to read it out in its entirety because it provides some really good insight into the Ombudsperson's power. So the inability to force change may be the central strength of the office. It requires that its recommendations be based on a thorough investigation of all facts, scrupulous consideration of all perspectives, and vigorous analysis of all issues. This application of reason produces results that are more powerful than could be achieved through coercion. A coercive process may produce reluctant change in a particular instance, but it creates a loser who will be unlikely to embrace change in the future. By contrast, change that results from a reasoning process changes a way of thinking, and the result endures to the benefit of all future users. So what this means is that while we have no official power to enforce change, we work with authorities to ensure fairness in a collaborative and consultative way. And the Ombudsperson now, can make recommendations and aim to assist necessary changes to ensure fairness moving forward. Okay, so in the first slide I did, the earlier slide on how we help, I mentioned educate and consult as part of our work. And a large part of that work is done by our Public Authority Consultation and Training Team, or PACT for short. The PACT team at our office came about because we really wanted to provide some proactive assistance to public authorities on how to be fair in their work, rather than simply reacting to the complaints that were brought to us. And so our PAC team, we provide training and presentations on administrative fairness to public authorities. We also consult with public authorities on ways in which to improve or enhance administrative fairness in their work. And the PAC team has produced numerous publications and other resources about administrative fairness. And we'll be putting a link to the website where you can find all of our fairness resources there. Okay, so in addition to all of the things we've already talked about, building trust with Indigenous peoples, First Nations communities, and Indigenous serving organizations is also central to our mandate. A large part of our work at the Office of the Ombudsperson is our commitment to support reconciliation in all aspects of what we do. To guide this, our office has a multi-phase Indigenous community services plan, and we're currently in phase 2 of. Central to this work is that we move at the speed of trust in relationship building, and we're focused on ensuring that our services are culturally safe, trauma-informed, and distinctions-based. So our work in phase 2 is being guided by 4 specific goals to continue that work of supporting reconciliation. And this is a collective effort that requires all the collaboration and commitment from all teams across our office with the guidance of our office's Indigenous Initiatives team. The 4 goals, as you can see them on the screen, are to deepen our connections with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, leaders, and organizations, to adapt and enhance our services by integrating reconciliation and Indigenous specific considerations into law, policy, and practice, to promote fairness in the context of reconciliation for Indigenous people with public bodies within our jurisdiction, and to build and sustain the Indigenous cultural competencies of all of our staff to ensure the provision of culturally safe services and an inclusive workplace culture. This work is ongoing, of course, and requires an approach that is really led by humility, respect, and openness, ensuring that First Nations and Indigenous peoples are heard and supported when seeking fairness. And again, we're going to be putting a link in the chat for the webpage of our office's webpage specifically on Indigenous initiatives, where you can find the Indigenous Community Services Plan. Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'm going to hand it back over to Lindsay now, who you met at the start of the webinar, and she'll talk about the next section on the Public Interest Disclosure Act.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Sandy, for, both our presenters for being here. We are going to shift over to chat a little bit about that second piece of legislation that guides our work, the Public Interest Disclosure Act. But before we do that, we're going to load another Menti here. I see that it's taking its time to load. Here we go. People are already answering. Great. This is just a little bit of a trivia question. What year did the Public Interest Disclosure Act come into effect in BC? And so there are 4 options: 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So we'll give you a few moments. It's great to see so many people, using the Menti there. Thanks for your participation. And so it's pretty, I mean, most folks are putting 2019. Definitely obvious that that is the popular choice. And then we've got a handful of votes for all of the other options, 2018, 2020, and 2021. Okay. Well, let's move on and actually talk about it. So our office, as I said, we have responsibilities under the Public Interest Disclosure Act, or PIDA, and this piece of legislation came into force in BC in December 2019. So for that large group that voted for 2019, you were correct. Everyone else, you weren't far off. And so uniquely, rather than an en masse application to the public sector, in BC, PIDA was rolled out to most public sector organizations in 7 phases over a 5-year period. And when the Act first came into force, it actually only applied to employees and former employees of BC government ministries and independent offices of the legislature. So a total of 30 public bodies and around 35,000 public sector employees. So that was that first group. However, shortly after, a few years later, beginning in April 2022, the Act began to be rolled out to the wider public sector, and rollout was complete in December 2024. So now the Public Interest Disclosure Act applies to 197 public bodies, covering approximately 320,000 current employees and then countless past employees. So as I said, it started by covering those government ministries and those independent offices of the legislature, and now it also covers boards, commissions, tribunals, crown corporations, health authorities, school districts, and colleges and universities in the province. So this piece of legislation allows for an employee or former employee covered by the Act to disclose concerns of wrongdoing from within their organization. And the Act also provides protection from reprisal, or in other words, retaliation, for employees who do speak up about wrongdoing. And it also includes confidentiality protections. So having this public interest disclosure legislation, it promotes accountability, promotes integrity and confidence in the public sector by ensuring that there is a safe way for employees to speak up when they see something wrong happening in their workplace. Also, employees and former employees, they can choose how they disclose wrongdoing. So they have a choice. We call the choice model. So they can disclose wrongdoing internally in their organization, either to their supervisor or to their designated officer at their organization. And when I say designated officer, I mean a senior official in your organization who is designated to be a primary point of contact for employees who wish to seek advice or report wrongdoing under PETA. Or they can report wrongdoing to the Office of the Ombudsperson. So there's that choice reporting model. Often we're asked, well, what do we mean by wrongdoing under this piece of legislation? Well, wrongdoing does have a specific meaning under PETA. So wrongdoing under the Public Interest Disclosure Act is serious misconduct that is in the public interest and not just in an individual or person's interest to address. So the 5 types of wrongdoing that are defined under this piece of legislation are as follows, and you can see them on the slide here. So a serious act or failure to act that, if proven, would constitute an offense under BC or Canadian law. The second one is an act or failure to act that creates a substantial and specific danger to life, health, or safety of persons or to the environment. And then the third is a serious misuse of public funds or public assets. And then the fourth is gross or systemic mismanagement. And then the last type of wrongdoing is directing or counseling a person to commit any of the above. So as I mentioned a few slides ago, this piece of legislation offers a choice model for those wanting to disclose wrongdoing. And so this means that people who want to disclose can come directly to our office to make a report. But more broadly, the Office of the Ombudsperson has a varied role under this legislation. So here's just a quick review of what our office can do. So we can provide advice to employees who are considering making a disclosure or reprisal complaint. We can assist with an investigation or part of an investigation. We also assist by supporting organizations in the development of policies and procedures in the implementation of the Act to their organization. And then, as I said, we have that choice model. So we also investigate disclosures from former and current public sector employees, and we do so in a fair and effective way. And then we also investigate reprisal complaints. So the Office of the Ombudsperson is actually the only body who has jurisdiction to investigate reprisal complaints under the legislation. So if an employee or former employee discloses wrongdoing to our office and it's investigated, at the conclusion of an investigation, the office will issue an investigative report containing any findings and recommendations, and then provide that to the head of the public body. So since 2019, our office has developed many, many resources to assist organizations in fulfilling their responsibilities under the Act. So this includes resources specifically designed for folks who have different roles. So employees, supervisors, those designated officers, and CEOs. And so just up here on the screen, we've got some of the examples. We have an e-learning course, and this is for employees, and that's called Speaking Up Safely. And these are all publicly available on our website, just an FYI. We also have another e-learning course called the Designated Officer Fundamentals. And we have a pre-recorded webinar called the Supervisor Responsibilities webinar. And then we have many, many other PETA resources for various roles, including a pretty detailed toolkit for designated officers. And so I believe we have the link to where you can find all of those in our chat. As I said, they're all publicly available. So that actually wraps up the content of the webinar today, and we're going to move into the live Q&A portion of the event soon and pose a few questions to our presenters. And we've been receiving those questions through the Zoom Q&A function, and many have been answered by our colleagues, which is great. And a few we've set aside to ask live as well. But before we do so, we just want to do one last Menti. We always find it interesting to see how people have interacted with our office before today. And so there's a number of options up on your screen. We've got, perhaps you've taken a fairness and practice workshop. Maybe you've utilized materials on our website, and that can be inclusive of our e-learning courses as well. So you can use that option if you've taken one of our e-learning courses. Perhaps you've been involved in an investigation or attended another event or webinar other than this one, or maybe you've utilized consultation services, and maybe this is your first interaction, which is great. And then we have an option for other as well. So we'll just give a few moments as those answers come in. I love seeing the kind of bubbles going into each of those answers. So thanks for filling that out, folks. So lots of previous interaction with our office, which is great. And lots of thumbs up. Awesome. Give you another couple moments as those come in. And the majority of the people who are answering have actually attended one of our workshops, which is great, which are workshops that our team, the Public Authority Consultation and Training team, do pretty regularly. There's still, answers. Great. Okay, well, let's move into the next portion, which is our live question period. And so we have set aside a few questions that have come in to pose. I think let's just get them up here. So we've got Sandy. Hi, you're back.
Hi.
We've got a few questions here that we've pulled out to pose to you that I think would be probably really valuable for everyone to hear, all the folks who are here attending the webinar. So I'm just gonna find, So our first one that I would like to pose, so somebody you mentioned in your bio, a collaborative approach. What does that mean?
That's a great question. It looks like an informal approach. So I like to start an investigation or start investigating the complaint by maybe picking up the phone and asking the authority about what's going on. I also think that there are lots of different ways of collaborating. So it's a really flexible model in terms of an approach to resolving complaints. But the other thing that we want to do is we want to reach out to you, the public servants, and get a sense of what's going on because you're the experts in the area. And I think if we can do that early, that can really help move the complaint along to maybe a more timely resolution as well. And we're really looking for your expertise in your area to help us understand the issues. So hopefully you'll see that kind of an approach more often, and that you'll find it maybe even a little bit less taxing in terms of responding to us. That's another thing that I want to be mindful of, is that you have lots of other work to do, and we want to be as efficient and as effective as we can when we're resolving these complaints.
Great. Thank you. We'll pull another question here, and this is about the Public Interest Disclosure Act. So the question is, making a disclosure under PETA seems really intimidating. How do I know if it's worth it?
That's a really good question. Making a disclosure about wrongdoing feels pretty scary, and it's normal for people to be nervous about that. But if you reach out to us, we're going to maintain your confidentiality, and we're going to be able to provide you with information about what that means when you make a disclosure and how we can support you in that. We're not going to leave you on your own. We're here to guide you through the process. There are protections in place if you are subject to some sort of reprisal. We are certainly there to look into that. But it's really important for public servants to reach out, because it's the reason the act was put into place was to ensure that there's integrity and accountability in the public service, and you as employees can play a part in that.
Thanks. And there was another question that kind of, I think, aligns around what is a reprisal complaint. So we said
Mm,
reprisal a few times, and we talked about a reprisal
hmm
complaint. So maybe
hmm
you could clarify that for us.
So if you've made a disclosure of wrongdoing and you are subject to some sort of action or punishment because you made the complaint, maybe you are not given the work that you're supposed to do, or your hours get changed, or some other impact is had, and you can you can link that directly to the fact that you made a disclosure of wrongdoing. That's called a reprisal. They're punishing you for having done so. And so we're really concerned about when that happens, and we would take that very, very seriously and be investigating it and making sure that whatever actions were taken can be undone where that's possible.
Great. Thanks for that. Yeah. This is a big question. So what is one of the most difficult issues that you see in public administration?
It's a tough time to be a public servant right now. We're very much aware of that. We are seeing declining trust in all public institutions, and at the same time, a much higher demand, which creates really big systemic pressures. Um, and those systemic pressures, the delays and that sort of thing, also create more distrust. So it's a bit of a cycle that feels like you can't win. But that's one of the things that our office is here to do, is try to improve the public confidence in government. And the way that we do that is by investigating and resolving complaints and holding government accountable. So, don't be afraid of those complaints, because in the end, those can actually really build your reputation. And hang in there, because I know it's not an easy job right now.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Here we'll take this one. So, wouldn't the ombudsperson be able to achieve more
Mm.
if they had power to enforce? What happens if the public authority doesn't want to do the things your office recommends?
Right. Well, and that goes back to that quote that by Steve Owens, one of the previous ombudsmen, and I really agree with him that I don't think that it would do us any service to be able to order government to make changes. Those kinds of changes, as Stephen Owens said, are done sort of reluctantly. So I think that it's a much better system for us to be able to have really exhaustive powers to investigate complaints, and then to work with the government to improve the services and ensure that they are fair. Um, that kind of resolution hopefully creates a desire for the change and support for the change, and a longer term impact on government services. That's really what we're looking for. We're not we're looking to improve the system and the outcomes for people. We're not looking for wins. We don't want to force people to do things. Um, and I really don't think that having the power to order the government to make a change would be helpful in the kind of work that we do.
There's one that, I mean, I think maybe it kind of falls in line a little bit with that, but somebody did ask about using restorative justice practices to
Mm,
resolve issues. I wonder if you could speak
hmm
to that.
Yeah. We're always looking for different ways of resolving complaints. And I know that in previous complaints, there has been some recommendations made that restorative justice be part of resolving that complaint. So it's one of the tools in the toolbox that could be used in the appropriate circumstances.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, here is another one. So, do you take complaints from the public about decisions made by elected officials or anything to do with budgets?
No, we don't. Elected officials are not under our jurisdiction. So the way that you deal with complaints about elected officials is by going to the Legislative Assembly itself. There is actually some mechanism there for complaining, but also, by voting. And no, we have no authority over budget decisions at all. Our authority is restricted to the decisions and that government makes, not in terms of programs and administrative matters, not budgetary matters.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we had a few questions kind of come out around that same topic around, how to make that change. So good clarification there. Thank you. So let's see here. I notice people are not trusting public services and government. How do we help that when we are delivering public services?
Well, I think that if you look at some of the advice we've given today about how you do your job to ensure that you're being fair, you will build a reputation for being fair and reasonable. And we are certainly happy to do that by recognizing when you are. So if we are investigating a complaint and we find that there's nothing to see in terms of unfairness, then we are happy to say that. And in fact, there was a recent public report, and I'm going to need some help with the name, stamp of approval, I think, where we investigated the Ministry of Social. I apologize. I'm so new. I don't know all the ministries' names. I call it the alphabet ministry because there are lots of letters in it. Lindsay, can you help me with the name of the ministry?
Jennifer, do you remember the name of that report? I might be
MSDPR about
MSDPR, but
stamp of approval.
Right. MSDPR was the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction.
You got it.
Yes. And stamp of approval is the name of the report. There was some concern about whether there were systems in place to ensure that people received the benefits that they needed in order to survive if the postal strike happened. And so we went in and looked at it because there was significant concern. And we found that the government had done a really good job of making sure that people were going to be able to receive their benefits. That's a public report that is out there that is actually laudatory of what the government did. So we like to be able to say when government does something right as well.
Great. Thank you. I think we have time. We can pop one more over to you here. We've had a couple of questions related to, what's your approach when an individual has multiple complaints underway with varying complaint avenues?
So there it could be two things. One is maybe they have a freedom of information complaint along with something that we're doing. We don't know about that unless the person who's complaining tells us. We do not share information between other statutory officers about what complaints are happening because we have to maintain confidentiality. So that is one aspect of that. And so that kind of thing, those both can happen at the same time. But if it's a situation where someone has received a benefit and not fully exhausted all of the appeal mechanisms that are in place, we are an office of last resort. So our immediate reaction is to ask the person who's complaining to go back and follow the appeal process. And then once they've done with that, if they're still not satisfied, then they're welcome to come back to our office.
Great. Thank you. Great advice. Well, you took a lot of questions. Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge we have over 400 people here today, which is like so fantastic. And so we tried to take a lot and we tried to also answer a lot kind of during the webinar. And I want to let folks know if we didn't get to your question, which could be a possibility considering the large amount of folks that we have here today, we would like you to reach out to us because we would like to be able to answer that question. So we are going to be sharing our email here at the end of the webinar in just a few moments, but we will wrap up the Q&A portion and we'll dive into our last few slides. So I just really want to thank people for being here and for posing those questions to us. We really, really appreciate that. And we do hope that we will hear from you afterwards. So we've been highlighting resources kind of throughout the session, and hopefully you will take us up on using those. And especially when we saw that one mentee of how people have interacted with our office previously, lots of people have been accessing our materials, so that's wonderful. But just as we want to plug them again, a reminder that they exist. We have some e-learning courses. We have one called Fairness 101. And this, of course, provides an overview of administrative fairness and teaches participants how to recognize and apply the key elements of fairness in their everyday role in the public service. And we also have, I spoke to it earlier, another e-learning course called Speaking Up Safely, which is about the Public Interest Disclosure Act. And it's really about employees, rights and responsibilities under that piece of legislation. And those e-learning courses, you can find a link to them from our website. So if you go to our website and go into our training materials, it'll take you over to our learning management system. And those are free for anyone to register for and take whenever you like. We do have a number of guides available on our website. We have a complaint handling guide. We have our fairness and practice guide, and those are all available on our website as well. You can download them and share them with your colleagues. And we also have a number of fairness fact sheets. So these are 1 to 3 page documents that can be used as quick reference guides. And they cover topics such as, communication and apologies and the essential steps to making a fair decision, amongst many more. So we encourage you to find those on our website as well. So we've got our last mentee here, and hopefully this is webinar feedback. This is our first offering of this webinar, so just be helpful to hear from you what you thought just through this mentee engagement. So there's those 3 questions with sliders that you can slide anywhere between strongly disagree and strongly agree for each question. And then what we're seeing on the screen is an average of all those answers that are coming in. So this is just really helpful for us to know how it's received. And I've said we will have a recording of this available, but good for us to know if maybe this is one that a lot of folks really got something out of, and so consider kind of how we might do it in the future. So please, take a few moments to answer that. I'm going to leave that up for just a few more moments because I do highly encourage you to provide us with that feedback. And I'll just say again, I'll reiterate, if we didn't get to your questions, we really do look forward to receiving those questions through email. Whenever you want to reach out to us, we're available. All right, so great. Had a lot of answers. I will pop to the next slide, and maybe you have that mentee still up on your phone or your browser and you're still thinking about it and how you want to answer. Please do go ahead and do that still. But I do just want to thank you for joining us, and we really appreciate the strong interest in this webinar. We're so happy that you could all be here with us today. To learn, about our office and what we do, and also how, we can help you in the work that you do. So we do offer, fairness and practice workshops regularly throughout the year. So if you're on our mailing list, keep an eye out for those. And if you want to just make sure that you're on our mailing list to hear about those offerings, do email us at consult@bcombudsperson.ca. This is the email that you can also send those questions to, and we can answer if we didn't get to the question during the time. And just a reminder, this webinar will be posted online. And I think that is about it. I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us. Thanks to our presenters. Thanks for our ASL interpreter as well. And we just really hope that you all have a wonderful day.